As Admiral Zorgax watched the blue and green world grow larger on the view screen, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He had conquered countless worlds for the Empire, but something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was the way the humans had resisted the Empire's initial scouting missions, or the strange energy readings coming from the planet's surface. Whatever it was, Zorgax pushed the feeling aside. He had a job to do, and failure was not an option. On the bridge of the command ship, the Admiral's subordinates worked frantically to prepare for the invasion. Fighters were loaded into launch bays, dropships were fueled and armed, and the fleet's massive battleships powered up their planet's scorching weapons. The air buzzed with tension and anticipation as the final pieces fell into place. Zorgax himself stood at the center of the organized chaos, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the preparations with a critical eye. He cut an imposing figure in his jet-black uniform, his craggy face lined with scars from 100 battles. His eyes, one organic and one a glowing cybernetic implant, seemed to miss nothing as he watched his crew work. "Admiral, all ships report ready for the assault," one of the bridge officers called out, saluting smartly. "We await your command." Zorgax nodded, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Excellent," he said, his voice a deep, menacing growl. "The humans won't know what hit them. This world will fall, like all the others before it." He turned to face the view screen, where Earth loomed ever closer. The planet's mottled blue oceans and verdant continents seemed to taunt him, as if daring the Empire to try and take this prize. Zorgax's smile widened. "Challenge accepted," he thought. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," the Admiral barked, his voice carrying across the bridge. "I want their defenses shattered before our troops make planetfall. And ready my personal guard. I will lead the ground assault myself." A chorus of acknowledgments rang out as the bridge crew leaped to carry out his orders. In the launch bays, pilots climbed into their fighters, their faces grim with determination. Armored troops boarded the dropships, checking their weapons one last time. The air hummed with the thrum of powerful engines as the fleet prepared to unleash hell. On the planet below, the humans remained oblivious to the gathering storm. They went about their lives, unaware that high above their heads, an alien armada was poised to strike. In hidden command centers and government buildings, a few grim-faced leaders watched the approaching fleet with growing dread, wondering how they could possibly defend against such an overwhelming force. But even as despair threatened to engulf them, the humans clung to hope. For years, Earth's greatest scientists had labored in secret on a project that could be humanity's salvation. A weapon unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, born of desperation and genius in equal measure. And as Admiral Zorgax gave the order to begin the attack, as the first Imperial lasers sliced through the void towards the unsuspecting planet, the humans' last desperate gambit was already in motion. The Empire believed this world would be an easy conquest, but they were about to learn the true depths of human ingenuity and resilience. For Earth would not go gentle into that good night. Humanity would rage against the dying of the light, and the Galactic Empire was about to discover that they had picked a fight with a species that did not know how to surrender. The battle for Earth had begun. As the Imperial fleet began its bombardment, the people of Earth scrambled to respond. In cities across the globe, air raid sirens wailed their mournful warning, urging citizens to seek shelter. But even as the populace ran for cover, Earth's militaries mobilized with a speed and efficiency that belied the chaos of the moment. Fighter pilots sprinted across tarmacs, leaping into their jets and rocketing into the sky to meet the alien threat head-on. Tanks rolled out of their bases, their treads churning up asphalt as they took up defensive positions. Artillery crews loaded their guns, preparing to fill the heavens with flak and fury. In command centers worldwide, generals and admirals barked orders, their faces lit by the glow of tactical displays. They moved their forces like chess pieces on a board, trying to anticipate the Empire's next move. But even as they put on a brave face, a grim realization settled in the pit of their stomachs. They were hopelessly outmatched. The Empire's ships hung in the sky like great black daggers, their hulls bristling with advanced weaponry. Against such firepower, Earth's defenses seemed pitiful, like bows and arrows against a lightning storm. The humans fought bravely, their pilots engaging the Imperial fighters in desperate dogfights, their ground forces firing defiantly at the alien dropships descending from the heavens. But for every enemy they felled, a dozen more seemed to take their place. In the streets, panic reigned supreme. Crowds stampeded through the thoroughfares, trampling the fallen in their haste to escape. Skyscrapers, once proud symbols of human achievement, crumbled under the alien onslaught, raining glass and rubble onto the screaming masses below. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal, a pall of destruction that seemed to blot out the very sun. And yet, amidst the carnage and the terror, pockets of resistance emerge. In shattered buildings and debris-strewn alleyways, brave men and women took up arms against the invaders. They were not soldiers, but teachers, doctors, factory workers, ordinary people driven by a fierce, unyielding love for their home. With improvised weapons and sheer grit, they fought the Empire street by street, house by house, refusing to yield even as the odds stacked higher against them. Watching the chaos unfold from orbit, Admiral Zorgax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This was the power of the Empire on full display, the might that had brought 1,000 worlds to heel. These primitives, with their laughable resistance, would soon learn the futility of defiance. But even as the thought crossed his mind, a flicker of unease stirred in his gut. The humans were fighting with a ferocity he had rarely encountered, a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that bordered on madness. They clung to their crumbling world like a drowning man clings to driftwood, even as the tide of the Empire threatened to sweep them away. It was almost admirable, in a foolish, naive sort of way. But Zorgax had seen such resistance before, and he knew it was ultimately meaningless. The Empire's victory was inevitable, written in the stars, and sealed in the blood of 1 billion conquered souls. And yet, as he watched the battle rage on the planet below, as he saw the humans continue to struggle against the inevitable, a cold sliver of doubt pierced his certainty. For he had also heard whispers of a secret the humans guarded, a final, desperate weapon born of their darkest hour. He had dismissed such tales as the desperate fantasies of the doomed. But as Earth burned, as the impossible resistance continued, Zorgax couldn't shake the feeling that he had gravely underestimated his foe. And that mistake, he feared, might be the Empire's undoing. As the Imperial fleet burned in orbit, Admiral Zorgax gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white with rage and disbelief. This couldn't be happening, not to him, not to the Empire. They had conquered 1,000 worlds, brought entire civilizations to their knees. And yet, here they were, undone by a single primitive planet and its damnable surprises. Around him, the bridge was in chaos. Alarms blared their shrill warnings as systems failed one by one, the ship's once pristine corridors now choked with smoke and debris. Crew members stumbled through the mayhem, their faces masks of terror and confusion as they tried desperately to restore some semblance of order. But Zorgax knew it was futile. Whatever weapon the humans had unleashed, it had crippled his fleet beyond repair. His ships were falling from the sky like leaves in an autumn gale, their hulls breached, their engines silent. It was a slaughter, a rout so complete that it defied all logic and reason. And yet, even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, the Admiral felt a flicker of grudging respect for his enemy. The humans had played their hand masterfully, luring the Empire into complacency before striking with a weapon beyond anything they could have imagined. It was a strategy worthy of the Empire itself, a reminder that even the most primitive species could be dangerous when cornered. But respect was a luxury Zorgax could ill afford. His forces were in disarray, his grand invasion plans shattered beyond repair. He needed to act, and act quickly, if there was to be any hope of salvaging victory from the jaws of defeat. With a snarl of rage, the Admiral slammed his fist onto the arm of his chair, silencing the bridge's clamor with a single brutal gesture. He rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with a cold, implacable fury that sent even his most seasoned officers cowering back in fear. "Enough," he roared, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "I will not allow this insult to stand. We are the Empire, and we do not bow to primitives and their parlor tricks." He turned to his tactical officer, a spindly, gray-skinned creature who quailed under his gaze. "Order all surviving ground forces to converge on the humans' major population centers," Zorgax growled. "We'll take this planet by force, even if we have to tear it apart piece by bloody piece." The officer stammered an acknowledgement, his fingers flying across his console as he relayed the Admiral's commands. On the planet below, Imperial troops rallied around their landing sites, preparing for a desperate, all-out assault on humanity's strongholds. But even as they marshaled their forces, the humans were preparing their own response. In cities and towns across the globe, military units and civilian militias alike took up arms, determined to defend their homes to the last. They dug in among the ruins of their cities, fortifying shattered buildings and cratered streets into makeshift fortresses bristling with whatever weapons they could muster. And at the center of it all, Dr. Ryder and her team worked feverishly to unravel the secrets of their own creation. The energy wave had been more powerful than they'd ever dreamed, but it had also been indiscriminate, ravaging friend and foe alike. They needed to understand its workings, to find a way to harness its power without unleashing further devastation. It was a race against time, a desperate scramble to master the forces they had unleashed before the Empire's counterattack could begin in earnest. The fate of the planet hung in the balance, poised on the knife's edge between salvation and annihilation. And as the first Imperial troops began their advance, as the thunder of battle once again echoed across the Earth's ravaged surface, all eyes turned to the skies, watching for any sign of the Empire's dreaded reinforcements. For both sides knew that this was only the beginning, that the true struggle for Earth's future was yet to come. And in that struggle, there could be no quarter asked or given, no mercy shown or expected. It was a war for survival, a battle to the bitter end. And neither side would rest until the other was utterly destroyed. As the remnants of the Imperial fleet struggled to regroup in orbit, Admiral Zorgax paced the bridge of his crippled command ship, his fury barely contained. The human weapon had decimated his forces, leaving him with a mere fraction of the ships and troops he had brought to bear on this wretched planet. But even in defeat, the Admiral's tactical mind raced, seeking some way to turn the tide. He had underestimated the humans once, a mistake he did not intend to repeat. If brute force had failed, then perhaps guile and cunning would succeed where raw power had not. He turned to his intelligence officer, a wiry, sharp-eyed creature whose species had a reputation for subterfuge and misdirection. "Find out everything you can about this human weapon," Zorgax snarled. "Its origins, its capabilities, any weaknesses we can exploit. I want to know who built it, how it works, and how we can destroy it." The officer bowed, a sly grin spreading across his face. "As you command, Admiral," he said, his voice a sibilant whisper. "I will unravel this mystery, even if I have to pry the secrets from the humans' cold, dead minds." As the intelligence officer set to work, Zorgax turned his attention to the planet below. The human resistance had bought time for their weapon to be used, but they were still outmatched and outnumbered. With the right strategy, the Empire could still grind them down, city by city, continent by continent. He opened a comm channel to his ground forces, his voice tight with controlled rage. "All troops, prepare for a full planetary assault," he commanded. "Target their major population centers, their seats of government and industry. We will choke the life from this world, and from the ashes, we will build a monument to the folly of defying the Empire." As the orders went out, the Imperial troops on the ground sprang into action. Tanks and armored transports rumbled through the shattered streets, while infantry squads advanced behind a hail of blaster fire. The human militias fought back with the ferocity of cornered beasts, but for every Imperial soldier they felled, a dozen more surged forward to take their place. In the hidden command bunker, Dr. Ryder and her team watched the carnage unfold with growing horror. The energy wave had bought them time, but it was clear that the Empire's resolve had not been broken. If anything, the attack had only stiffened their determination to conquer and enslave. "We need to find a way to use the weapon again," Dr. Ryder said, her voice tight with urgency. "If we can't stop the Empire here and now, there won't be an Earth left to save." But even as she spoke, warning lights flashed on the bunker's displays. Imperial forces were converging on their location, guided by the telltale energy signatures of the human weapon. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered, and when that happened, all hope would be lost. Dr. Ryder turned to her team, her eyes blazing with a desperate determination. "We have to destroy the device," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let the Empire get their hands on it. We've bought ourselves a chance, but it's up to the rest of humanity to make it count." There was a moment of stunned silence, as the enormity of her words sank in. To destroy the weapon was to abandon their last, best hope, to consign themselves and their world to the tender mercies of the Empire. But as they looked around at each other, at the faces haggard with exhaustion and strain, they knew that there was no other choice. They had unleashed a power beyond their control, a force that could shatter worlds and reshape the very fabric of the universe. In the wrong hands, it would be a tool of unimaginable destruction and suffering. With heavy hearts, they set to work, planting explosives and overloading power systems. As the countdown ticked away, they said their farewells, each knowing that they might not live to see the dawn. And as the bunker collapsed around them, as the human weapon vanished in a blaze of searing light, the fate of the Earth hung in the balance, poised between the rapacious hunger of the Empire and the desperate valor of those who dared to stand against it. The battle for the planet's future had only just begun. As the Imperial troops marched through the rubble-strewn streets of Earth's cities, they were met with a resistance that stunned them in its ferocity. The human defenders, though vastly outgunned and outnumbered, fought with a tenacity that bordered on madness, contesting every inch of ground with a fury that left the invaders reeling. In the shattered remnants of New York, a ragtag band of National Guard troops and civilian volunteers turned the city's towering skyscrapers into fortresses, raining down fire on the advancing Imperial columns from improvised sniper nests and makeshift artillery positions. The narrow streets became killing fields, choked with the twisted wreckage of burned-out vehicles and the bodies of the fallen. In London, the venerable streets of the ancient city became a labyrinth of death, as British troops and citizen militias waged a guerrilla war against the Imperial occupiers. They struck from the shadows, using their intimate knowledge of the city's winding alleys and underground tunnels to ambush and harass the enemy at every turn. And in Moscow, the city's sprawling metro system became a subterranean battlefield, as Russian special forces and partisans waged a desperate underground war against the invaders. The tunnels rang with the clatter of gunfire and the screams of the dying, while up above, the city's grand boulevards and stately buildings crumbled under the relentless imperial onslaught. Across the globe, the story was the same. Humanity, backed into a corner and facing annihilation, fought with a savage desperation that the Empire had never before encountered. They fought not for glory or conquest, but for survival, for the right to exist in a universe that seemed suddenly bent on their destruction. And yet, for all their bravery and sacrifice, the humans knew that they were only delaying the inevitable. The Empire's resources were vast, its armies seemingly inexhaustible. For every city that held out, a dozen more fell, their defenders slaughtered or driven into hiding. The planet's surface was slowly but inexorably transforming into a blasted wasteland, its once vibrant life choked off by the relentless march of the Imperial war machine. In the skies above, Admiral Zorgax watched the progress of his forces with a grim satisfaction. The human resistance was proving more stubborn than he had anticipated, but it was only a matter of time before they were crushed beneath the weight of the Empire's might. And when that happened, when the last human stronghold had fallen and the planet lay prostrate at his feet, he would make an example of this world, a warning to any who might dare to defy the Emperor's will. But even as he savored the thought of victory, a flicker of unease stirred in the Admiral's heart. The intelligence reports from the planet's surface were troubling, hinting at a growing human insurgency that seemed to be organizing itself with uncanny speed and efficiency. There were whispers of supply lines being disrupted, of Imperial patrols vanishing without a trace, of a shadowy resistance movement that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. And then there was the matter of the human weapon, the one that had so devastated his fleet. Though the device itself had been destroyed, Zorgax couldn't shake the feeling that its secrets hadn't died with it. The humans were clever and resourceful, and if they had built one such weapon, who was to say they couldn't build another? As he pondered these unsettling thoughts, a sudden commotion on the bridge jolted him out of his reverie. A group of Imperial guards, their armor blackened and blood-spattered, dragged a battered human figure before him, throwing the prisoner to the deck at his feet. "Admiral," one of the guards said, saluting crisply, "we found this human skulking in the lower decks carrying this." He held out a small cylindrical object, its surface etched with the same cryptic symbols that had adorned the human weapon. Zorgax took the device gingerly, his eyes widening as he realized the implications. It was a message, a call to arms from the shadowy resistance leader known only as the Ghost. The human's words were defiant, urging his people to fight on, to never surrender, to make the invaders pay for every inch of their conquered world in blood and fire. Zorgax crushed the device in his fist, his eyes blazing with rage. It seemed that the battle for Earth was far from over, and the Empire would not rest until every last trace of human resistance was stamped out, no matter the cost. In the chaos of the ground war, a small team of human special forces moved like ghosts through the shattered ruins of the once great cities. They were the best of the best, hand-picked for their skills and their unwavering dedication to the cause of Earth's freedom. Led by Captain Jake Razor Sullivan, a battle-hardened veteran with ice-blue eyes and a face lined by years of warfare, the team had one goal: to strike at the heart of the Imperial occupation, to bring the fight to the enemy in a way they would never forget. For weeks, they had been gathering intelligence, studying the movements and patterns of the Imperial forces, looking for a weakness they could exploit. And now, finally, they have found it. The Imperial command ship, the massive dreadnought from which Admiral Zorgax directed the conquest of Earth, had taken up position in low orbit, its shields and weapons temporarily powered down as it underwent repairs from the damage inflicted by the human energy weapon. It was a rare opportunity, a chance to strike a blow that could turn the tide of the war, and Sullivan and his team were determined to seize it. Under cover of darkness, they infiltrated the Imperial landing site, stealing the shuttle and blasting their way into orbit. As they approached the command ship, they could see the scars of battle on its hull, the gaping wounds inflicted by the human weapon. But they had no time to admire their handiwork. The moment they were detected, the ship's defenses came alive, filling the void with a storm of fire and fury. Weaving and dodging through the maelstrom, the human shuttle darted towards the command ship's hull, its shields flaring as Imperial fire rained down upon it. With a final, desperate maneuver, they slammed into the dreadnought's hangar bay, skidding to a halt amidst a shower of sparks and debris. And then they were out, storming through the ship's corridors like vengeful demons, cutting down Imperial troopers with ruthless efficiency. Sullivan led the way, his face a mask of grim determination as he fought his way towards the bridge. But as they neared their objective, they found their path blocked by a phalanx of Imperial guards, their black armor bristling with weapons. At their head stood a towering figure, his face hidden behind a snarling helmet. It was Zorgax's personal enforcer, a monstrous warlord known only as the Hammer. He was a legend among the Imperial forces, a being of implacable cruelty and savage strength, and his mere presence was enough to strike fear into the hearts of even the bravest human warriors. But Sullivan and his team were beyond fear. They had seen too much, endured too much, to be cowed by any foe, no matter how formidable. With a roar of defiance, they charged forward, meeting the Imperial Guards head-on in a clash of fire and steel. The air was filled with the screams of the dying and the stench of burning metal as the two sides tore at each other with savage fury. At the center of the maelstrom, Sullivan and the Hammer fought like demons, their blades flashing in the flickering light of the ship's emergency systems. They were evenly matched, two warriors at the peak of their powers. And for a moment, it seemed as though their duel might go on forever. But then, with a final desperate lunge, Sullivan drove his blade through the Hammer's chest, piercing the warlord's armor and sending him crashing to the deck in a spray of blood and sparks. With their champion fallen, the rest of the Imperial Guards were quickly overwhelmed, cut down by the vengeful fury of the human warriors. And then, at last, Sullivan and his team stood on the bridge of the command ship, face to face with the hated enemy who had brought so much destruction and suffering to their world. Admiral Zorgax, once so proud and arrogant, now cowered before them, his face pale with fear as he realized the true depths of his folly. He had underestimated the humans, had thought them weak and primitive. But now, as he stared into the cold, merciless eyes of his conquerors, he understood the truth. The humans were not weak. They were strong, stronger than he could ever have imagined. And they would fight to the last breath to defend their world, their people, their very existence. It was a lesson the Empire would not soon forget. And as Sullivan and his team took the Admiral into custody, as the news of their victory spread like wildfire across the planet, a new hope began to dawn in the hearts of all who had suffered under the yoke of imperial oppression. The battle was far from over. But for the first time, the humans dared to dream of a future free from fear, a future in which they, and not the Empire, would shape the destiny of the stars. With the capture of Admiral Zorgax, the Imperial forces fell into disarray. Bereft of their leader and their flagship, the once proud armada seemed rudderless, adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. Across the planet, human resistance cells took heart from the news of the Admiral's defeat. They redoubled their efforts, striking at the enemy with renewed vigor and determination. In cities and towns, in forests and mountains, the fight raged on, a guerrilla war of attrition that slowly but inexorably began to turn the tide. The Empire, for all its vast resources and advanced technology, found itself mired in a quagmire of its own making. Its supply lines were stretched to the breaking point, its troops exhausted and demoralized. And with each passing day, more and more of its soldiers began to question the wisdom of their mission, to wonder if the price of conquest was too high. As the resistance grew in strength and boldness, the Imperial forces began to buckle. Outposts fell, one by one, liberated by human fighters emboldened by their victories. The skies, once dark with the shapes of enemy ships, now echoed with the triumphant roar of human engines. And then, in a moment that would be remembered for generations, the leaders of Earth's nations came together, united in purpose and resolve. In a broadcast that reached every corner of the planet, they issued an ultimatum to the Empire: withdraw from Earth and its solar system immediately, or face the consequences. It was a bluff, a desperate gambit by a species that knew it still teetered on the brink of annihilation. But it was a bluff that worked. Faced with the prospect of a long, bloody war of attrition, a war it could no longer be certain of winning, the Empire blinked. Slowly, grudgingly, the Imperial ships began to pull back, rising from the planet's surface like a flock of monstrous birds taking flight. They gathered in orbit, a sullen, brooding presence that seemed to darken the very stars. But even as they prepared to depart, the Empire's leaders couldn't resist one final act of spite. In a transmission beamed to every human device, they warned of the consequences of defiance, of the terrible retribution that would one day be visited upon the upstart species that had dared to challenge the might of the Emperor. The humans, though, were unmoved by the threat. They had seen the face of annihilation, had stared into the very maw of oblivion, and had emerged unbroken. They knew, now, the true measure of their own strength, the indomitable spirit that dwelt within each and every one of them. As the last Imperial ship vanished into the depths of space, a great cheer went up from the people of Earth. In cities and villages, in deserts and tundra, they poured into the streets, their faces alight with joy and relief. They had done the impossible, had beaten back the most powerful force in the galaxy through sheer grit and determination. But even amidst the celebrations, there were those who looked to the stars with eyes haunted by knowledge. They knew that the Empire would not forget this humiliation, that somewhere out there in the vast reaches of space, its leaders were already plotting their revenge. Earth had won its freedom, but the price of that freedom would be eternal vigilance. The human species had taken its first steps onto a larger stage, had earned its place among the great powers of the galaxy. But with that power came responsibility, and the knowledge that they were now and forever a target. In the years to come, there would be other challenges, other threats that would test the mettle of humanity. But for now, in this moment of triumph and relief, the people of Earth could bask in the knowledge that they had done something remarkable, something that would be remembered for as long as their species endured. They had looked into the face of annihilation and had not blinked. They had stood together, had fought as one, and in doing so, had forged a bond that would never be broken. Come what may, they would face the future as they had faced the Empire, with courage, with determination, and with the unshakable belief that as long as they stood together, there was nothing they could not overcome. As the last of the Imperial ships limped away from Earth, trailing debris and leaking atmosphere, the people of the battered planet slowly emerged from their shelters, blinking in the unfamiliar sunlight. They picked their way through the rubble-strewn streets, past the twisted wrecks of enemy landing craft and the scorched remnants of once proud buildings. At first, there was only silence, a stunned, disbelieving quiet that seemed to stretch on forever. And then, as the realization began to sink in, as the truth of their victory began to dawn on them, a murmur began to build. It started low, a whisper of hope and wonder that rippled through the crowds like a gentle breeze. But soon it grew, swelling into a roar of joy and triumph that shook the very foundations of the planet. The people of Earth cheered and wept. They embraced one another and danced in the streets, overcome with a feeling of relief and euphoria that defied description. In the days that followed, that sense of unity and purpose only grew. Across the globe, humanity came together as never before, united by their shared trauma and their common cause. Old grudges and rivalries were forgotten. Petty differences and squabbles set aside in the face of the monumental task that lay ahead. For the people of Earth knew that their victory, though decisive, was only the beginning. Their world lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its infrastructure ravaged by the brutal Imperial onslaught. Rebuilding would take time, years of hard work and sacrifice, but they were ready to face the challenge head-on. And as they looked to the stars, to the vast expanse of the galaxy that had so recently seemed hostile and alien, they did so with a newfound sense of curiosity and wonder. They had seen firsthand the dangers that lurked in the cosmos, but they had also seen the incredible potential for discovery and growth, for forging new alliances and exploring new frontiers. In the years that followed, Earth would become a hub of innovation and exploration, a beacon of hope and progress for all the sentient species of the galaxy. Its people would spread out across the stars, establishing new colonies and outposts, making contact with civilizations both ancient and new. And though the scars of the Imperial invasion would never fully fade, the people of Earth would come to see them as a badge of honor, a testament to their resilience and their unbreakable spirit. They had faced the worst the universe had to offer, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. As for the Empire, its fate remained uncertain. Though its forces had been soundly defeated at Earth, it remained a powerful and dangerous foe, with vast resources and a burning desire for vengeance. There were whispers of unrest within its ranks, of power struggles and internal strife that threatened to tear the once mighty regime apart from within. But the people of Earth knew that they could not afford to lower their guard, not even for a moment. They would remain vigilant, always ready to defend their world and their way of life against any threat, no matter how great or small. And so, as the years turned to decades and the decades to centuries, the legend of Earth's stand against the Empire only grew. It became a tale told across the galaxy, a shining example of what could be accomplished when a species stood together, united in purpose and resolve. To the oppressed and downtrodden, it was a message of hope, a reminder that even the mightiest of empires could be brought low by the power of a determined few. And to the proud and the powerful, it was a warning, a stark reminder of the perils of underestimating the strength and spirit of those they sought to conquer. But to the people of Earth, it was something more. It was a promise, a sacred vow that they would never again bow to the will of tyrants or despots. They had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to ever surrender their freedom or their destiny. And as they looked to the stars, to the infinite possibilities that lay before them, they knew that no matter what challenges or threats the future might hold, they would face them as they had always done, together, as one people, one world, one unbreakable human family.